Okay. Hello, my name's Chris. What's yours? Welcome back to my channel, where as well as doing a Doctor Who marathon from the very beginning, I am also doing a video on each new episode as soon as I can after it airs. Just digested my immediate thoughts about it. Last week, obviously, the episode was The Legend of Ruby Sunday. I was a little bit late getting that out, so my video digesting The Legend of Ruby Sunday was only 2 days ago. So my opinions on it haven't really changed much since then, and as I said in that video, I am doing these particular videos as the episodes separately before I'll talk about the story as a whole, because obviously they are two parts of the same story. I also said that Empire of Death would have to do a fair bit of heavy lifting in order to sort of like bring the story as a whole up to standard for me, because I didn't really care for The Legend of Ruby Sunday. A lot of, not arguments, it's a very friendly place here on the whole. People disagreed with me in a very civil way. And a lot of people were saying, yes, but it is part one of part two. Like, I don't care about that. That means I can't judge the story as a whole, but it's an episode of broadcast television that should be able to stand on its own, regardless of whether or not it's setting up something else. I mean, a lot of episodes of, let's say Happy Valley, for example, tells one story across a series. If an episode's not very good, it's not very good. That was a bad example. Happy Valley's brilliant. But if an episode doesn't do it for me, then I didn't think the episode was very good, regardless of whether or not it's a part in a story. Classic Doctor Who is made up of multi-parters, of course it is, and you know, some of those stories suffer because an episode isn't very good, whereas other episodes in that story are excellent. So I will sort of like push back there, and because maybe it was only 2 days ago that I did the video, I'm still not entirely sure The Legend of Ruby Sunday is a good episode. But I went into this one hoping, I guess, that this one would be. And I didn't think it was. It didn't do that heavy lifting in order to bring the story up as a whole. Now, obviously, I'll talk about the story as a whole a little bit later on. But this particular episode started well, actually. There was excitement. The Doctor and Mel escaping from Sutek at the beginning. Mel got another, probably again the best bit of the episode, where she said, "There's nothing we can do except fight." To give that line to Mel when they're already rehabilitating her character from the perception of her as she was in the 80s, absolutely outstanding, gold standard. Gemma Redgrave was absolutely excellent when she delivered her speech, thinking that she was going to die, and then died. But the scale of the destruction and the death, you knew it was going to get undone somehow. And I guess then you're sort of like going, well, how that's going to get undone is the integral part of whether or not I find that satisfying. However, what I found this episode suffered from was the death all of the death at the beginning. It makes you realise, oh, they're clearly going to get out of it. Had that been the cliffhanger and not Sutek's reveal, in the same way that the Pandorica opens, the way that ends, if we were then left with a week between, that would have stayed with you a little bit more, and it would give you a week to sort of like work yourself up into how will that be reversed. But having happened at the start of the episode, I'm already going, oh, it's going to be reversed, and it kind of robs the impact. Now, Gemma Redgrave does phenomenal work selling it, and I did have a oh my god. And the thing is, had it just been Gemma Redgrave, I could buy that maybe Russell T Davies was going to kill off Kate Stewart. I wouldn't have wanted him to, and the way that Gemma Redgrave performed it would have made me, I would have reacted incredibly emotionally to that. But like everyone goes, so I know it's not going to be permanent. And it kind of undercut everything. So from there, I didn't switch off, obviously, and I'm always going in with an open mind, and I'm always like, well, this, there's a story to tell here. Russell T Davies, while I might, disagree sometimes with his approach to Doctor Who, is a very clever writer, very good writer. Let's not write this off straight away. So I went with the episode, of course I did, and I kept watching it with an open mind, and I didn't care for it. And I again, the return of the Doctor Who grump. When I was talking about Legend of Ruby Sunday, I can't remember now, I should have rewatched my video on that before I did this one, but I think I might have mentioned, and if I didn't, this is what I thought of the Legend on Ruby Sunday. It was a lot of noise. It was too noisy, disguising a sort of like a fairly blank space. And it was noisy because there were so many things nominally surface level being thrown at it. The mystery of Ruby's mother and the Susan Twist character, Susan Triad. When we get into this episode, obviously we found with the Susan Triad character has sort of like been revealed for what she was, and then we have more focus, I guess, on the mystery of Ruby's mother and why that would bother Sutek as much as it does. And I don't understand why it bothers Sutek as much as it does. And in all honesty, I don't mind Ruby's birth mother being revealed to be an ordinary person. I don't mind that. In fact, actually, I would prefer that. In the video commentary, which I watched this morning with me cuppa, Russell T Davies says that it's sort of like a reaction to how he didn't care for how they undid Rey's parentage in the Star Wars sequel trilogy, which I kind of agree with him on that, because I felt the same. I was like, I don't mind the fact that Rey came from nothing to then find out she's the granddaughter of Palpatine. No, preferred it the other way. So the idea that Ruby's birth mother is just an ordinary girl, and who fled a horrible circumstances and did it to protect her daughter and was so young, that's quite an important story to tell. And for Doctor Who to go there, absolutely valid. Reverse engineering this big mystery around it is then what makes it disappointing. It isn't the fact that Ruby's of ordinary origins. I liked that, but not after it's been set up as such a big mystery that Sutek is bothered about the resolution, and also it can snow inside because of it. And maybe we'll get more answers in the second series. However, that doesn't change how I feel watching Empire of Death. And it's like I said about how I don't think The Legend of Ruby Sunday was a good episode on its own. It's also an unsatisfactory viewing experience watching Empire of Death, even coming as a conclusion to The Legend of Ruby Sunday. So it's not that I was concerned with the explanation for Ruby's birth mother being an ordinary person, but I am bothered about it being that conclusion to that mystery. They don't seem to go together for me at all. The Doctor's explanation of it being significance being poured upon it doesn't ring true for me, because Russell T Davies poured that significance on it. While I understand, obviously, Ruby's going to be like, oh, I want to know who my birth mother is, and then they can't find her. Yes, that's going to be significant, but like it wasn't Ruby that was making it snow inside. That was Russell. So if that's the weight of this mystery, then that does need to be paid off. Her pointing at the sign to name Ruby, great, but who was she pointing for? Sutek was a bold choice to bring back, and like I said in the last video, I'm glad it wasn't Daleks, I'm glad it wasn't Cybermen, I'm glad it wasn't the usual suspects. But I was reticent about it just being... because the reveal kind of just relies on it being Sutek for Sutek's sake. And if people are not familiar with Sutek, this great big god of death, which obviously is important. If you know Sutek, though, as a Doctor Who fan, then it relies on it being Sutek has come back. And he isn't really as formidable in Empire of Death as he is in Pyramids of Mars. And so even as a return for Sutekh, I didn't find it that satisfying. Yes, obviously he destroys the universe, which, you know, he goes one further than Thanos does, and then still hugging the TARDIS in the unit office. The depiction of the devastation of the universe has an immediate impact in what it does to the Doctor. But again, because the scale of the devastation is so big, you know, the show can't continue once it's defeated Sutekh in that mold, so everything has to be reversed. And how it's reversed is they just drag Sutekh through the vortex, which again doesn't ring true for me, because in order for Sutekh to have destroyed everything, the Doctor had to have landed everywhere he did. And so there's a line where the Doctor says, because Mel asks him, "You haven't landed everywhere, they must be fine," and he goes, "No, all of time and space," which again, that just glosses over, that's a bad line, that just glosses over the fact that Russell wanted everything destroyed and the Doctor hasn't landed everywhere. So to reverse it is even more flimsy, in my opinion, because it needed more work put into it. And Sutekh is the god of death, he's all powerful, but he can't, and yeah, because it's smart rope and smart gloves, but still, just take it off. Or like, he can, he does start to eventually, but there's so much time there for Sutekh to get out of the trap that the Doctor and Ruby put him in, that the ending of him being killed in the vortex, a vortex that he survived in for like centuries, millennia, and visually I thought Sutekh was impressive. I know that some people would have concerns about him just being a CGI creation, but I did think he looked quite good. And I understand, because Russell made much of the fact that this is a story he's had in his head for decades, but he doesn't want to, he couldn't tell it because of the they didn't have the budget, and they do now. But Sutekh kind of is very static and stationary, which again, I understand it's practical. I don't know, I felt the whole thing was, again, a lot of noise disguising sort of like inherent thinness underneath it. Now, while all of the devastation has happened, you get the implication that the Doctor, Mel and Ruby are in the remembered TARDIS for quite some time, and yet again Sutekh doesn't leave unit, but they go to this devastated planet where there's one person still left, because the devastation of the universe now also is playing havoc with people's memories. And is that because the Sutekh has destroyed the universe from different points in time, which I guess makes sense to me, but I don't think it gave it the scale, and that scene felt sort of unnecessary. I feel like you could have shown the scale of it in different ways. The scale of everything coming back is the graphics in the TARDIS, and the Doctor does sort of like point out from the remembered TARDIS which planets have fallen. And I get maybe you have to see the Doctor walk in that devastation to get the impact of it, but I felt like that scene, which actually paradoxically was incredibly performed by Ncuti and Sean. Like, what, like it felt like it came from somewhere else. Like, that scene was absolutely impeccably acted, but it wasn't germane, I didn't think, to Empire of Death. I did enjoy that the remembered TARDIS showed up, and it does make sense that it was created for Empire of Death, and then they realised they could use it for Tales of the TARDIS, and now they have a standing set for a spin-off series, which is marvellous. And I did enjoy the Tales of the TARDIS vignettes. I didn't really care for the Pyramids of Mars bookend scenes, but that was really just an excuse to be able to repeat Pyramids of Mars between the two episodes, which is, you know, I guess like a good idea. And actually, the re-edit of Pyramids of Mars is I thought it was quite good, and the bookend scenes were literally just I guess taking place in Empire of Death while the Doctor and Ruby are talking about Sutekh. So the fact that they were able to weave it in that way is quite good, and I do like the remembered TARDIS. Mel, again, I think Mel might just be the best thing now that there's been both episodes, the best thing in this story, because Bonnie Langford's reaction to the Sixth Doctor's coat, it was touching. A tick for the memory TARDIS, and then they land in 2046 because of Roger Ap-Williams' DNA testing policy. And the thing about that, because I've seen some criticisms say that is this a deleted scene from 73 Yards where they got rid of any mention of DNA testing? And other people have said, well, no, it's just something that Roger Ap-Williams was able to implement when he was Prime Minister, but in 73 Yards he wasn't Prime Minister for very long. I understand that. I understand it being something that maybe came later in his reign as Prime Minister. So I'm not overly, I can reconcile it in my brain. But what I would say is that there was absolutely no reason why it couldn't have been seeded in 73 Yards and made more sense in Empire of Death. Yeah, you can explain it away, why it wasn't, but I understand people scratching their heads about it because it so easily could have been put in 73 Yards, and even if it made people go, that means that Ruby could find out who her mother is, because 2046 is obviously the future from 2023 when she was with Davina, who couldn't find her birth mother. I understand that you could explain it away that way, but had it been seeded in 73 Yards, then it would have been something for us to have picked up on, and then it would have come back in Empire of Death, and it would have been narratively more satisfying. I sympathise with people that are like, well, that came out of nowhere, because it kind of did. I know you can explain why, but it doesn't change the fact that there was a missed opportunity there, I think, in 73 Yards to have set that up. Also because 73 Yards takes place in an abandoned timeline, so it's not like Ruby and the Doctor would remember about the DNA testing. Well, the Doctor would, so he could have, I don't know. That means the Doctor's known about it anyway, because he brings it up in Empire of Death. It just feels incredibly, will I go so far as to say as botched? Because I think maybe that's how I feel. I feel like this finale has been a massive letdown for me. I have enjoyed more in this season than I expected to. Russell T Davies surprised me more in this season, and in this new era actually, because with the 60th anniversary specials, he surprised me more than I expected him to. I thought I knew what to expect when it was announced he was coming back, and then he proved me wrong a little bit. But with this finale, it's almost a little bit like he's reverted to type, and not a good example of that either. Because even though I have said I have certain issues with Russell T Davies finales in terms of the fact that they're made out to be enormous and huge and big and noisy, with very little underneath. Some of them I have enjoyed more than others. Parting of the Ways, I think, is great. The Stolen Earth and Journey's End, I've got criticisms about that because of the how big it is and the resolution and all of that. But I have fun along the way. In this one, I don't have that fun along the way. I find myself scratching my head, and weirdly, actually, there's a sense of being left outside. I don't feel left behind by it because I'm following it. Like, I'm following it perfectly fine. I just feel like it's bitten off more than it could chew. Possibly bitten off more than it could chew. I didn't need to do that because there are sort of like quite apparent solutions within there. That, like I say, more connective tissue back to 73 Yards, missed opportunity. The mystery of Ruby's birth mother could have been seeded a lot better. I still think we'll probably get an explanation as to why it snowed inside, which maybe would tie into Mrs. Flood, because obviously the Mrs. Flood mystery is still out there. She's something, and she's got plans. They just weren't a lot. Like, she had nothing to do with Sutekh. So I'm still sort of like invested in the breadcrumbs. Like, there's also we're certainly going to see more of Ruby and her family, which is a good thing, because I think Millie Gibson as Ruby has been excellent, and her partnership with Ncuti Gatwa has been, I think, potentially one of the best in the entire show. I think the 15th Doctor and Ruby Sunday are a great team, which only feeds into that feeling of disappointment with this finale, because I feel like they were sold a little bit short. I think it's fantastic the way they work together to beat Sutek, and I'm not keen with the quality of how they beat Sutek, but them two together doing it and working together is performed to perfection. It felt very Doctor Companion, it felt very heroic on Ruby's part as well, which was great, and I just think the pair of them, like, they have more to give. And I know there's Varada Sethu who's going to come back, potentially as the same character, we don't know, but she's coming back as a new companion. The dynamic of three will be really interesting, but I'm really glad we're not leaving Ruby Sunday behind, at the same time as fundamentally, absolutely 100% agreeing with Russell T Davies that everything Ruby's just found out, she has to stay there. She has to stay at home. Like, I completely get that. So that final scene where they say goodbye to each other was excellent. And there's something about Ncuti in that scene, and I don't know what it is. I don't know whether it's intentional or what. It must be, because he's a very emotionally intuitive actor. But he does something with his eyes where they're not as... even when he's been sad before, there's been sort of like spark in them. But he does something with his eyes in that scene where they're kind of separate from the rest of his face. And in the eyes, I managed to see like the Doctor. Like, whoever the Doctor is underneath all of the different faces, I saw connective tissue with that character that we've been watching since... Well, that I've been watching since 1988, but who, like, we have been watching since 1963. Like, it was there behind his eyes. And I don't know how he did it, and I don't know whether he meant to do it, whether it was a happy accident or not. But it reminded me, because there's a film about the life and death of Peter Sellers, I think it's called, but it's a biopic of Peter Sellers, and Geoffrey Rush plays Peter Sellers in it. And there's a moment, just a really, really potent moment, where he just sort of like looks up at the camera and you just see Peter Sellers. And I think that's kind of how I felt when Ncuti did that. He wasn't looking at the camera, obviously, but he did something there that I don't know how he did. It was like magic. So continuing with the 15th Doctor, I'm really glad I can hang on to the fact that I have responded so positively to the 15th Doctor, because this finale has unfortunately let me down. But I'm not going away from the series completely deflated, because I love what Ncuti's doing, and I love what Millie Gibson is doing, so I'm glad she's going to come back. Varada Sethu is an unknown quantity at this point as the companion, but I thought she was really good in Boom. And I saw her in Andor as well. I thought she was excellent in that. So the future of Doctor Who isn't necessary. It's not like I'm done with Doctor Who. I never will be. Like, I love it. And if an episode lets me down, then there's always next week. That's why finales, when they let me down, hit a little bit harder, because there isn't one next week. We have to wait now. When these spin-offs eventually emerge, the whole universe of the show, I still don't really like the term Whoniverse, but there we go. The Whoniverse will feel a bit more populated. It won't feel as drawn out between episodes. So whether or not they're going to materialise this year, we don't know, but hopefully we'll get some news about them. Otherwise, we're now just waiting until Christmas. We've got a feeling that Tales of the TARDIS is just a really cheap thing for them to be doing in terms of production, not artistically, because I actually do think it's got a part to play, because it's a good way of introducing new audience to old Doctor Who. Obviously, I will never stop watching the full stories in their complete form, but to have sort of like omnibus edits bookended with the chance to see old characters again, if the Tales of the TARDIS can fill that sort of like legacy characters coming back for new material void, then, you know, I am all for that. and it lets Doctor Who get on with being fresh and new and forging forward and looking ahead, which I like to do with a positive outlook. So while Legend of Ruby Sunday and Empire of Death, as a story now as well, not just 2 episodes, but as a story, have left me a little bit underwhelmed. Actually, forget the little bit, it's just left me underwhelmed. I don't know why I sort of like sugarcoat it. I think it's because there's a tendency when discussing opinions in Doctor Who fandom to either go one extreme or the other, and then there's the danger of playing that part going forward. So if an episode has fundamentally upset you and annoyed you, and you get quite angry about it, you're in danger of just being a hater going forward, because I guess it can sort of like consume you. Equally, the other way around. So there's a danger to hate on things just because, and you're in danger of being a little bit unfair. But there's also a danger of sort of like simping over it and casting a blind eye to certain things. And in much the same way as football teams, it can change between eras as well. So, like, for example, I think that certain showrunners get criticised for one thing, while other showrunners get a free pass for the same thing because of various other factors. So, for example, I actually think that Empire of Death is as thin as the Battle of Ranskorav Kolos, but the Battle of Ranskorav Kolos is a much quieter story and it doesn't really make a fuss, so it's more exposed to criticism, whereas Empire of Death is all noise, and maybe that acts as a little bit of misdirection. But I felt the same watching both of those, and it's not like I'm saying I think the Battle of Ranskorav Kolos is any good, but I felt the same watching those two episodes. And you know, it isn't because I am a hater. I've been open about my sort of like reservations about Russell T Davies's approach to Doctor Who as a showrunner, but they have also, like I say, this new era has surprised me in how much I've, on the whole, enjoyed it so far. So not enjoying Legend of Ruby Sunday and Empire of Death like to the extent that I did isn't because like I think Russell T Davies is Russell T Davies must go again. I don't think that. I'm just talking about 2 episodes of Doctor Who that I didn't like, and I didn't like not liking them. So it's not like it's feeding into this inherent negativity that I've got, because I don't. I've got an inherent positivity when it comes to Doctor Who. I love it. I want to love it. I sit down every week that it's on, and I'm like, I'm excited about watching Doctor Who. How I feel at the end of any given episode is as a result of that episode and my personal thoughts and responses to it. And it isn't like I've watched every episode this series and thought this series is rubbish, because I haven't thought that. And on the whole, I think this series has been better than I thought it would be. But despite some solid moments along the way, I thought Empire of Death was a poor resolution. It's a shame to finish the series on that note. Still, onwards. Now, there is no new episode next week, so the next Saturday's video I'm going to do, obviously there's no new episode to digest, but what I will do is I'll be digesting this new era so far, and I'll rank all of the episodes from Star Beast to Empire of Death, from worst to best. Just discuss the era as a whole and where we might be going forward. Maybe speculate on some of the things that are left to resolve. I know I said that I would talk about the story as a whole, but I think I kind of like bled into that once I'd spoken about my feelings of Empire of Death as a single entity. Moving on from that, I do feel like I've spoken about the story as a whole, as a two-parter. Empire of Death had a lot of heavy lifting to do. and it didn't do it. So unfortunately, the story as a whole was disappointed me. As ever, thank you so much for watching. Thank you for bearing with me if you vehemently disagreed with me. Even people that agree with me have found a way to be angry, actually. So, what did you think of Empire of Death? Did it round off the season in a satisfying way for you? Or was it sloppy, rushed and messy? Was there enough there for you to hang on to have a great time and get swept along for the ride? Or were you just sort of like plodding along behind it going... Let me know in the comments below, and I will see you next week for a video digesting all of this new era so far, including, like I said, that episode ranking, as well as continuing with the Doctor Who marathon from the very beginning, currently in season 9, John Pertwee's 3rd year as the Doctor. So if you don't want to miss any of those, hit the subscribe button, clang the cloister bell, and I will see you soon.